Welcome to Survival Horror Ambience, where we dive into tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. In today's story, we follow a group of friends embarking on a desperate cross-country journey, hoping to find refuge in a rumored zombie-free zone. As they navigate through a world overrun by the undead, they face unimaginable horrors and challenges that test their bonds and their will to survive. Join us as we explore this gripping tale of survival, courage, and the relentless fight for safety in a world gone mad. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories. Chapter 1. The Journey Begins. The sun was setting behind the mountain, casting an orange glow over the dusty road as the group of friends packed the last of their supplies into the RV. The air was thick with tension and anticipation, the kind that comes before an uncertain journey. Jake, the de facto leader of the group, slammed the back door shut and turned to face his friends. "All right, guys, this is it. If we stick together and keep our wits about us, we can make it to Haven. Remember, it's supposed to be a safe zone, completely zombie-free." Emily, Jake's girlfriend, gave a nervous smile. "I hope it's true. I don't think I can handle another close call like last time." Beside her, David, the tech-savvy member of the group, double-checked his maps and coordinate. "I've got the route all planned out. We'll take back roads to avoid the major cities. It should minimize our chances of running into trouble." Sophia, the youngest and most optimistic of the group, hugged her backpack tightly. "We've come this far. We're still standing. We can do this." The last member of their group, Mark, a former mechanic with a knack for improvisation, checked the RV's engine one last time. "We're good to go. Just remember, if anything goes wrong, we stick to the plan, find a safe place, regroup, and move on." With a collective nod, they climbed into the RV, the engine roaring to life. As they pulled onto the road, fading daylight cast long shadows, making the landscape look even more desolate. The once vibrant highways were now littered with abandoned cars and the remnants of a world that had fallen apart. As they drove through the night, the friends shared stories of their past, their hopes for the future, and their fears of what lay ahead. Radio, tuned to an emergency broadcast station, crackled with intermittent updates, most of them grim. Hours passed, and the initial excitement began to wane. Emily was the first to break the silence. "Jake, what if Haven isn't real? What if it's just a rumor?" Jake kept his eyes on the road. "We don't have much choice, Em. We've got to believe in something. And right now, Haven is our best bet." David chimed in. "I've seen forums and heard transmissions. There are people out there who swear it's real. Place where the infection hasn't reached." Sophia looked out the window at the darkened landscape. "We'll find it. We have to." As the night wore on, fatigue began to set in. They decided to pull over at an abandoned gas station to rest and refuel. Mark and Jake took the first watch while the others tried to get some sleep. The eerie silence of the night was broken only by the distant howls of infected roaming the countryside. Jake scanned the horizon, his grip tightening on the baseball bat he kept by his side. "Stay sharp, Mark. We can't afford any mistakes." Mark nodded, his eyes never leaving the perimeter. "We've got this, Jake. We'll make it to Haven." The friends settled into an uneasy rest, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with dangers couldn't yet imagine. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough to keep hope alive. Chapter 2. Burst Night. The night began quietly. The group huddled in the small office of the gas station, surrounded by shelves of dusty snacks and defunct machinery. The only light came from a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. Jake leaned against the door, his baseball bat at the ready, while Mark kept a close eye on the makeshift barricade they had erected. Jake's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but his senses remained on high alert. The eerie silence of the night was punctuated only by the occasional creak of the building settling. He listened intently, hoping to hear nothing but the steady breathing of his friends. Suddenly, a faint noise caught his attention. It was a distant, unsettling sound, a low, guttural moan that sent shivers down his spine. Jake strained to hear, and the noise grew louder, accompanied by the unmistakable shuffling of feet. He realized with a sinking feeling that a horde of infection was nearby. Carefully, Jake moved to wake the others. He gently shook Emily's shoulder, whispering in her ear, "Em, wake up. We've got company." Emily's eyes snapped open, and she quickly nudged David and Sophia awake. Mark, already alert, nodded to Jake, acknowledging the approaching danger. The group remained silent, their breaths shallow as they listened to the sounds outside. The moans grew louder, and the shuffling turned into a frantic, chaotic stampede. The infected were closing in, drawn by some unseen lure. Suddenly, a rat scurried across the floor, knocking over an empty soda can. The noise echoed through the gas station, a sharp, metallic clang that shattered the fragile silence. Group tensed, their eyes wide with fear. The infected outside went berserk. They began pounding on the windows and doors, their decayed hands smashing against the glass with relentless force. Cracks spiderwebbed across the panes, and the wooden barricade groaned under the pressure. "We have to stay quiet," Jake whispered urgently, his knuckles white around the baseball bat. "They'll go away if they don't find us." The horde was relentless. The windows shattered, glass raining down as the infected tried to claw their way inside. Barricades splintered, the wood giving way inch by inch. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Rat appeared again, darting out from behind a stack of old newspapers. It scampered across the floor and through a gap in the barricade, drawing the attention of the infected. The collective guttural howl, the horde turned its attention to the fleeing rodent. The infected spilled out of the gas station, chasing the rat into the darkness. The building fell silent once more. Only sound the distant, fading moans of the infected as they followed their new prey. The group let out a collective sigh of relief, their bodies trembling with the adrenaline of the close call. Jake wiped the sweat from his brow, and his grip on the bat finally relaxed. "That was too close," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily hugged herself, trying to shake off the fear. "We need to find somewhere safer. We can't stay here." David nodded in agreement. "We'll move at first light. We need to put as much distance between us and them as possible." Sophia, still clutching her backpack, added, "Let's just make it through the night." They settled back into their uneasy rest, knowing that the horde could return at any moment. As the hours dragged on, tension remained palpable, each creak and groan of the building keeping them on edge. When dawn finally broke, casting a pale light over the desolate landscape, the group gathered their supplies and prepared to move out. The road ahead was uncertain and filled with danger, but they had survived the night, and that gave them a glimmer of hope. With the RV packed and ready, they set off once more, the memory of the night serving as a stark reminder of the peril they faced. But together, they knew they stood a chance. The journey to Haven continued, each step bringing them closer to the rumored sanctuary and further from the horrors they left behind. Chapter 3. The Gauntlet. The early morning sun cast long shadows over the deserted highway. The RV rumbled along. The group was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts, the events of the night still fresh in their minds. Tension was palpable, a silent understanding that the worst might still be ahead. Dake gripped the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the road for any signs of danger. Beside him, Emily checked the map, her fingers tracing their route. "We're not far from the next town," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We should be able to find more supplies there." David, seated at the small table in the back, tapped away on his laptop, trying to hack into any remaining security cameras in the area. "If we can get a feed, we'll have a better idea of what we're walking into." Sophia peered out the window, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Do you think there are any survivors out there?" Mark, leaning his shotgun, responded grimly. "If there are, probably not in great shape. We need to be prepared for anything." As they approached the outskirts of the town, the landscape grew eerier. Abandoned cars lined the streets, some still with their doors open, belongings scattered around as if people had left in a hurry. The buildings, once bustling with life, now stood as silent monuments to a world that had crumbled overnight. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the night, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Jake swerved, trying to keep control of the vehicle. "What the hell was that?" he shouted, looking frantically around. Emily pointed ahead, her face pale. "Look." A horde of infected was pouring out of a nearby building, drawn by the noise of the RV. They moved with terrifying speed, their eyes filled with a hunger that was almost palpable. Jake slammed on the gas, trying to outrun them, but the road ahead was blocked by a pileup of cars. "Hold on," Jake yelled, swerving the RV onto a side street. The vehicle lurched and bounced, the sound of scraping metal filling the air as they navigated the narrow alleyway. The infected were relentless, chasing them with a ferocity that seemed almost supernatural. As they turned a corner, they found themselves face to face with another group of the undead, blocking their path. "We're trapped," Sophia screamed, her voice tinged with panic. Mark loaded his shotgun, his face set in grim determination. "We have to fight our way out. There's no other choice." David, grabbing a crowbar, nodded. "Let's do this." Jake and Mark jumped out of the RV, guns blazing. The deafening roar of the shotgun echoed through the streets as Mark took down several of the infected. Jake, using a baseball bat, swung with all his might, the sickening crunch of bone and flesh filling the air. Emily and Sophia stayed inside the RV, providing cover with makeshift weapons. David, wielding the crowbar, fought alongside Jake, each swing a desperate attempt to keep the infected at bay. Despite their efforts, the horde kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. The group fought with everything they had, but fatigue was setting in, their movements growing slower and more desperate. Just when it seemed they would be overwhelmed, a loud explosion erupted nearby, sending a shockwave through the streets. The infected, momentarily disoriented, staggered and fell. Jake turned to see a figure standing on the roof of a nearby building, holding a makeshift bomb. The stranger shouted down, "This way! Hurry!" Without hesitation, the group made a break for it, following the stranger through a series of alleyways and into an abandoned warehouse. The doors slammed shut behind them, and the infected pounded against the metal, their growls and screams echoing through the night. Inside, the stranger revealed themselves, a rugged-looking man with a scar running down his cheek. "Name's Cole," he said, extending a hand. "You guys look like you could use some help." Jake, breathing heavily, shook his hand. "Jake, thanks for the save." Cole nodded. "We've got a small group of survivors here. You're welcome to stay and rest. But we can't stay here long. The infected will find a way in eventually." Emily, catching her breath, asked, "Do you know anything about Haven?" Cole's eyes darkened. "I've heard the rumors. Some say it's real, others think it's just a myth. But it's as good a plan as any. We'll head out in the morning." The group settled in, grateful for the brief respite, but knowing that their journey was far from over. As they huddled together in the dim light of the warehouse, the sounds of the infected outside served as a constant reminder of the danger they faced. The road to Haven was long and treacherous, and the night was far from over. For now, they had found allies in their fight for survival, and that gave them the strength to keep going. Chapter 4. Trust and Terror. As the night deepened, the warehouse offered a brief illusion of safety. Pounding of the infected against the metal doors was a constant reminder that this haven was temporary. Inside, Cole's group consisted of 3 others, a wiry man named Travis, a middle-aged woman named Linda, and a young woman, Kelly, who seemed barely out of her teens. After introductions, they all huddled together, sharing whatever scraps of food and water they had managed to scavenge. Flickering light from a single candle cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the atmosphere even more tense. Travis, his eyes darting nervously, leaned closer to Jake. "So you guys are heading to Haven, huh?" he asked, his voice a low whisper. Jake nodded. "That's the plan. You heard of it?" Travis glanced at Cole, who was deep in conversation with Emily and Mark. Or continuing, "Yeah, I've heard of it. Heard it's supposed to be some kind of safe zone. But I gotta tell you, not everyone thinks it's real." Linda, overhearing the conversation, interjected. "We had a friend, Sam. He believed in Haven, swore it was real. He left a few weeks ago to find it and said he'd come back for us once he did." He paused, her eyes misting over. "We never saw him again." Sophia frowned. "What do you mean? He just disappeared?" Linda nodded, her face grim. "Yeah, Haven might just be a wild goose chase. Some people think it's just a trap or that it doesn't exist at all." Tension in the room thickened. The hope of a safe place was the only thing keeping Jake and his friends moving forward. Possibility that it might not exist was a blow they hadn't prepared for. As the night wore on, they took turns keeping watch. Everyone was on edge, constant moaning and scratching outside, making sleep difficult. But eventually, exhaustion won out, and most of them drifted off. In the middle of the night, Kelly, who had been sleeping close to her boyfriend Travis, started to toss and turn. Unbeknownst to the others, Travis had been bitten earlier and had hidden the wound. Now, as the infection took hold, his eyes glazed over, and his breathing became labored. Suddenly, a strangled cry broke the silence. Kelly woke to find Travis looming over her, his eyes filled with a mindless hunger. Before she could react, he lunged, teeth bared. Her screams echoed through the warehouse, jolting everyone awake. Chaos erupted as Travis attacked Kelly, his once human instincts replaced by a ravenous need to feed. Cole grabbed his shotgun and fired, a blast echoing through the confined space. The noise was deafening, but it did little to deter the infected outside, who began pounding on the doors with renewed vigor. Jake and Mark rushed to help, but it was too late for Kelly. Travis had inflicted too much damage before they could intervene. Cole's face was a mask of grief and rage as he reloaded his weapon. "We need to get out of here now," he shouted. The infected outside, drawn by the commotion, finally broke through the weakened doors. They poured into the warehouse, their moans rising to a fever pitch. The group fought desperately, using anything they could find as weapon. Jake swung his baseball bat with all his might, each impact a sickening crunch. "Fall back," Cole yelled, leading the charge toward the back exit. They scrambled through the narrow passage, the infected hot on their heels. Linda, fighting off tears, managed to grab a few supplies before they fled. As they burst through the back door into the cold night air, the reality of their situation hit them hard. The infected were relentless, and nowhere seemed safe. They ran, the sounds of the horde growing fainter as they put distance between themselves and the warehouse. Finally, they stopped to catch their breath, the group huddling together in the shadows of a derelict building. Cole looked at Jake, his eyes hard but determined. "We stick together. We fight together. And maybe, just maybe, we find haven, if it exists." Jake nodded, gripping his baseball bat tighter. "Agreed. We move at dawn." As the first light of day began to creep over the horizon, they knew the road ahead would be even more dangerous. But with new allies and a shared determination, they pressed on. Hope of haven pushing them forward. Chapter 5. The Last Stand. As dawn broke, the group gathered their belongings and prepared to leave their temporary shelter. The events of the previous night left everyone on edge. The shared sense of purpose kept them moving forward. The streets were eerily quiet as they made their way out of the town. The only sounds were the distant moans of the infected and the occasional shuffle of footsteps. Ole led the group, his shotgun at the ready, with Jake and Mark flanking him. Emily, Sophia, and Linda stayed in the middle, while David brought up the rear, constantly scanning for threats. They stuck to the shadows, avoiding main roads and keeping their movements as quiet as possible. The group's pace was brisk but cautious, every step filled with tension. They knew that any noise could draw the infected to them, and they were in no shape for another fight. After several hours of walking, they reached the outskirts of the town. Ahead of them lay a stretch of open desert, the sun already climbing high in the sky. The heat was oppressive, and they knew that traveling in the open would be dangerous, but they had no choice. Ole pulled out a pair of binoculars and scanned the horizon. "There's a rest stop about a mile ahead," he said. "We can take a break there, get some water, and figure out our next move." The group nodded in agreement, and they set off across the desert, the heat radiating off the sand in waves. By the time they reached the rest stop, they were exhausted, their clothes sticking to their bodies with sweat. The rest stop was a small, dilapidated building with a few picnic tables and an old water pump. It was a far cry from the safety they sought, but it provided a brief respite from the relentless sun. They took turns pumping water and filling their canteens, the cool liquid a welcome relief. As they rested, Emily pulled out the map and spread it on one of the tables. "We're here," she said, pointing to their location. "If we keep heading east, we should reach Boulder City by nightfall." "Is that a good idea?" Linda asked, her voice tinged with worry. "It's a long way to go without knowing what's out there." "We don't have many options," Jake replied. "Staying here isn't safe, and going back isn't an option." David, who had been silent for most of the journey, spoke up. "I've been thinking. If we can find a working vehicle, we might be able to make it to Haven a lot faster. Cole nodded. Worth a shot. Let's see if there's anything around here. The group split up, searching the rest stop for anything useful. In one of the abandoned garages, they found an old pickup truck. It was dusty and rusted, but it seemed intact. Jake popped the hood and examined the engine. It's old, but it might just work. We need to find some fuel. They scoured the area and managed to siphon gas from a few abandoned cars, filling the truck's tank just enough to get it started. With a bit of effort, the engine roared to life, and the group let out a collective sigh of relief. They piled into the truck, Cole taking the wheel. As they drove east, the landscape gradually changed from desolate desert to the more populated outskirts of Boulder City. The journey was tense, every shadow and movement a potential threat, but the truck allowed them to cover the ground quickly. As they neared the town, they saw signs of chaos, abandoned cars, broken windows, and bloodstains on the pavement. But there were also signs of hope. Handwritten messages on buildings read, "Safe zone ahead" and "Survivors welcome." They followed the signs, navigating through the streets until they reached a large, fortified building. A group of armed survivors stood guard, their faces wary, hopeful. Cole stepped out of the truck, his hands raised in a sign of peace. "We're not infected. We're just looking for safety." One of the guards, a tall man with a scar across his face, stepped forward. "Welcome to Haven," he said. "If you want to stay, you'll have to follow our rules. You're safe here." Just as they began to relax, a guttural roar echoed through the streets. The group turned to see a horde of undead shambling towards them, drawn by the noise of the truck. Panic surged through the survivors as the infected closed in, their numbers overwhelming. "We need to get inside," Jake shouted, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her towards the fortified building. The guards sprang into action, their rifles cracking as they fired into the approaching horde. Cole and David joined them, their own weapons adding to the cacophony of gunfire. "Get to the building," one of the guards yelled, gesturing for the group to move. Linda and Sophia ran ahead, their eyes wide with fear. Mark covered their retreat, his machete swinging in brutal arcs as he cut down any infected that got too close. The group made it to the entrance just as the horde reached the outer defenses. The guards slammed the doors shut, barricading them with whatever they could find. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The sounds of the battle outside filtered through the walls, a constant reminder of the danger they had narrowly escaped. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice trembling. "You saved us." The guard with the scar nodded. "We're not out of the woods yet. Those things will keep coming. We need to be ready." As the survivors settled into the relative safety of Haven, a sense of uneasy calm settled over them. They had made it this far, but the road ahead was still uncertain. The infected were relentless, and the world outside was unforgiving. That night, as they sat around a makeshift campfire, the group couldn't shake the feeling that their struggle was far from over. They had found a temporary sanctuary. True safety remained elusive. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, Jake looked at his friends, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. "We'll get through this," he said, voice firm. "Together." Emily squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his resolve. "Together," she echoed. Outside the walls of Haven, the undead roamed, a constant reminder of the nightmare that the world had become. But inside, there was hope. It was fragile and fleeting, but it was enough to keep them going. The future was uncertain, and the road ahead would be fraught with peril, but as long as they had each other, they would face whatever came their way, together. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey with our brave survivors as they fought their way through the apocalypse in search of safety. But as they settle into their temporary haven, the uncertainty of the future looms large, and their battle is far from over. Stay tuned to Survival Horror Ambience for more tales of terror and survival. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling adventures. Until next time, stay safe, keep your lights on.